Ladies and gentlemen, the following segment of the podcast is presented exclusively by the Heritage Foundation. For 52 years, Heritage has fought tirelessly for America's founding principles and advancing conservative public policies. Much more than a think tank, Heritage is a conservative policy powerhouse, fighting for the everyday American to advance common sense policies and dismantle the D.C. bureaucracy. Our founding fathers gave us an extraordinary system of government, and the Heritage Foundation is dedicated to defending the heritage and carrying on their legacy for future generations. So get involved by completing their national survey on President Trump's agenda by visiting heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Great Heritage Foundation.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
A few hours ago, we heard that Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, was being shown the door. But as he went out one door, he went in another one, and that was the nomination to be the UN ambassador. Here's what Donald Trump said in a Truth Social posting. He said, "I'm pleased to announce that I will be nominating Mike Waltz to be the next United States ambassador to the United Nations. From his time in uniform on the battlefield in Congress and as my national security advisor, Mike Waltz has worked hard to put our nation's interests first. I know he will do the same in his new role. In the interim, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as national security advisor while continuing his strong leadership at the State Department. Together, we will continue to fight tirelessly to make America and the world safe again. Thank you for your attention to this matter." I mean, he hoodwinked everybody.
Stunning.
Yeah, so that happened today. Fox's John Roberts, a nice depiction of today's events involving one Mike Waltz. Quite the turnaround throughout the course of the day there. I'm going to break that whole thing down for you. Hey there, happy Thursday. The great one is still in the Holy Land. And so Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. I'll be here with you today and tomorrow as well. It is always an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. And I'm going to start out by breaking down Mike Waltz's situation and also the whole Signal app flap nonsense thing. Some of the backstory here, because it's going to play into what comes next with that UN ambassador thing. So I'm going to break that piece down for you. Coming up in the second hour, I'm going to get into some econ news, because if there's one thing that breaks my brain, just is so painful to me to hear, it is the GSS media, your godless souls and slanderous news media, trying to work their way through any kind of economic news. But when they have something they think they can hang around Trump's neck and do him in with, it's that much more painful. And even a lot of conservatives don't get it. Macroeconomics, not the strong suit for a lot of people. Average American is financially illiterate. That goes like threefold for those in news media generally. So I'm going to break down the economic news and tell you the truth. Plus, on this National Prayer Day, some religious views, including from the Supreme Court. We're going to talk about what really is going on with Doge. And coming up in the third hour, we're going to discuss the leveraging of Trump's deal. You know, it's amazing how many foreign leaders seemingly are only, maybe in recent days, finally going back and reading that book from 1987. Things are coming together. Trump's plan is coming together exceptionally well. So we'll walk through all this throughout the course of today's show. So let's get into this whole Mike Waltz thing today. And I want to start by breaking down what happened with the whole Signal app situation. Dates back to March 15th. And that's why it seemingly was kind of weird that after a month and a half today, as we start May, Mike Waltz all of a sudden out of the picture. I mean, especially since he was in President Trump's cabinet meeting yesterday. He was on Fox and Friends this morning as the national security advisor. This was obviously something that came together rather quickly. So let's go all the way back to what happened on March 15th, because this is going to come up quite a bit in the coming weeks. Were they war plans? War plans. Remember how that was bandied about over and over again by the left. No, they were not war plans, not by a long shot. Was the original Atlantic story that broke the whole signal thing a nothing burger? No, it wasn't a nothing burger, but was it a leak that was intentional? No, it wasn't that either. So here we are. It has been a month and a half since National Security Advisor, now former, Mike Waltz's national security team managed to add the Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg, ironically, one of Trump's biggest journalistic adversaries, to a signal thread in the lead up to a military attack on Iranian-sponsored Houthi terrorists in mid-March. It's been just over a month since Goldberg decided to come forward with the leak, which was interesting given the timing. Why, for example, would he have waited well over a week before he came forward with the story originally? Because if the guy had really been on the level, if he had really been acting in our country's best interest as he purported to be doing when he came forward with the information, wouldn't he have immediately responded in that thread that, hey, guys, yeah, I kind of crazy. It looks like I really should not be on this thing, right? If you were to find yourself on a thread with the Secretary of Defense, with the Secretary of State, with the National Security Advisor, and they're like kind of some things being discussed that sound like they're strategically paid, wouldn't you, if you're really thinking, I got to do the right thing by the kind, hey guys, don't know why I'm here, but think I was a mistake. Okay. But he didn't do that, right? And there can be only one viable reason for that. He was waiting to see if he would be included in any future threads before he came public with what he saw on the one that he was included on March 15th. Okay, so Goldberg was not a patriot, as so many in the GSS media claimed that he was. He certainly isn't a hero, but he is still a big part of the story behind the scenes right now. Goldberg is what he's always been. He is a self-serving, anti-Trump journo turd who only came public after 10 days when it became clear that he was not going to be included in any additional internal communications. So let's be clear about something. If this guy really was a decent human being, if he really was most concerned with the interests of the country, the security of the military, he would have immediately and discreetly handled this situation directly with the Trump administration right that day, as opposed to first announcing that this took place in the Atlantic after a week and a half. And so once he sat back, saw that he wasn't going to be included in anything else, boom. That was how you knew that it was a mistake by Team Waltz and not something intentionally done to undermine the Trump administration. Now, more about that piece in a second. About the actual original details that were released. Because, again, this is all going to become relevant again in coming weeks. If you go back to the fully linked signal thread that was posted by Goldberg in The Atlantic, it read like this. It said, team update. Time now, 11:44 Eastern Time. Weather is favorable. Just confirmed with CENTCOM, we are a go for mission launch. F-18s launch first strike package. 12:15 Eastern Time. 13:45, military time there. Trigger-based. F-18. First strike window starts. Target terrorist is at his known location, so should be on time. Also, strike drones launch. MQ-9Ss. Okay, and then it says 14:10. More F-18s launch the second strike package. At 14:15, strike drones on target. This is when the first bombs will definitely drop, pending earlier trigger-based targets. At 15:36, F-18 second strike starts. Also, first sea-based Tomahawks launched. Okay, that was it. That was the extent of it. Now, some specific things there, some specific times there. Now, again, are those war plans? No. It's ridiculously overstated, right? And for multiple reasons. You realize that the actual locations of the strikes were never mentioned. The actual locations never mentioned. The names of the targets. You realize that the names of the targets are never mentioned? Now, let me ask you, has there ever been a war plan? Has there ever been any kind of plan perpetuated that didn't actually include where the attacks would take place or who or what the objective is that you're going after? Just go get them, guys. Right? They just kind of count on you being stupid. So what this clearly was an operational update. But again, while it was not war plans, it was obviously information that if it had fallen into enemy's hands ahead of time, could have certainly compromised the mission or worse. And so on that note, it eventually led to what happened today with Mike Waltz being shown the door that some of his staffers before him had already been shown. You know, he had already shedded some staffers leading up to today. Mike Waltz had. And when you take a look at that, you take a look at the next aspect of this story, the Signal app itself. You know, a lot of people, especially on the right, pointed to the Biden administration and said, hey, they even put out guidance back in December that said use of the Signal app was a best practice for use by government officials. Now, I mean, that's not necessarily the best excuse anybody's ever used. Like, if your go-to excuse for, but Biden said it was a best practice. I mean, how many Biden administration determined best practices would you expect the Trump administration to use? Right? I mean, like, if anything, that should be the first clue that the Signal app maybe wasn't the best idea to be using. But anyway, the bottom line is this. If only governmental communication services were being used, a mistake like what happened in that instance would not have happened, because only people that would have been able to be included in a sensitive communication chain would have been already authorized within that government chain. So that is one of the many potential problems that can crop up with a third-party app that anyone can use. Now, many had wondered about whether someone on Waltz's team set this up as some kind of an intentional leak. Now, I'm not sure who set up the thread chain that included Goldberg's name. But what I will tell you is that I've known Mike Waltz for a number of years. I've interacted with his team for a number of years. They are all first-class people. Mike is a retired Army colonel, decorated Green Beret. I mean, you're talking about the best of the best, true American hero here. This guy is not some guy who boobs around live, not some guy who surrounds himself with slugs. He's an American patriot. He's always had a team, from my experience, to match. And so that was what made that whole situation that much more surprising from where I sit. Now, thankfully, the mission succeeded unimpeded, and there was an important lesson that was learned. So that was the takeaway, and perhaps should have been the end of this story. But it wasn't, as we saw today. And that is potentially in part due to yet another lawsuit. How many lawsuits are there against the Trump administration in some form or fashion? Over 220. We've been celebrating Trump's first 100 days this week. Trump has a historic number of executive orders he signed, 143. The left has filed over 220 lawsuits against him. They're pacing over 2 lawsuits a day. And that is at the crux of what is likely behind the turn of events today. I'll break that down and tell you why it's really important to stay strong behind Waltz right now. That is next. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
Listen, folks, if you're like me, you're passionate about protecting our American values. That's why I trust the Heritage Foundation. They're dedicated to promoting policies based on free enterprise, limited government, and traditional American values. The Heritage Foundation does more than just produce policy recommendations. They're mobilizing conservatives across the country. And right now, they need you to take action by completing their national survey on President Trump's agenda. Your responses to this survey will help guide Heritage leadership as they work closely with folks in Washington to promote your values, secure America's borders, and restore our freedoms. Here's what I want you to do. Visit heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/LEVIN to complete your survey. It's very, very important. My friends at Heritage need you to act now to help them maximize the impact on President Trump's first 100 days. Heritage is committed to preserving our founding fathers' principles and ensuring that America remains a beacon of freedom and opportunity. So I know you won't sit on the sidelines. You'll get involved, please, today, and make your voice heard. Visit heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Please complete your survey today. That's heritage.org/LEVIN, paid for by the Great Heritage Foundation.
Should never take impeachment off the table. We should never take where we see law breaking. We should never take accountability off the table. And I think that we should be, promising anything the way that Trump tries to promise certain, locking up his political enemies. But I do believe that our legal processes exist for a reason. Impeachment exists for a reason, and it should absolutely be on the table. It should be on the table for every president. Every president should know that if you break the law, you could be prone to removal from office.
There we go. We should never take impeachment off the table. We should never take AOC off of TV. Just keep talking. Let's go. I was just telling Mr. Producer that every time I see AOC with Bernie, now, I can't help but to think of Bill Belichick and his girlfriend. Just both of those are very unhealthy situations. It just one a little bit more creepy than the other. I grant you, but nevertheless, it's interesting and odd dynamic all the same. Thank you very much, AOC, in impeachment. That's back on the table. Although, the impeachment talk is heated up, right? But Al Green was first on the scene. We were only 2 weeks into the Trump presidency when the first articles of impeachment were brought in the House against Trump. The left has lost its mind long before. All right, so talking about Mike Waltz, his situation, and kind of the backstory behind the sudden turn of events that came into play today. One thing that I flagged back in March, and I made a note to myself on this to revisit it, because my note to myself and also to the audience of my show was that this story isn't over. Because as soon as we saw a lawsuit that had been filed against the Trump administration over the use of the Signal app, and we saw that case ended up in the court of one D.C. judge, James Boasberg, the same judge, remember, who ruled against Trump's deportation flights under the Alien Enemies Act. This wasn't over. This story was not going to be over. And one of the things that's happened behind the scenes within the past week, it hit the news just kind of briefly, but that's also not over yet. The case that was filed against Waltz, against the NSA, against the Trump administration over the Signal app, also was amended to include alleged chats between Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and his family. And so there are numerous additional violations that are being built into this original thing. And so as information is coming forward, as the legal proceedings are happening behind the scenes, Brian Mudd in for the Great One.
Folks, I need to talk to you about something crucial to the future of America. Our friends at the Heritage Foundation are on the front lines fighting for our conservative values. Heritage is dedicated to promoting policies that will help bolster our economy, protect our borders, and uphold the rule of law. They're working tirelessly to defend our Constitution and the principles that make America exceptional. To help accomplish this, they need you to complete their national survey on President Trump's agenda today. So you can participate in this survey by going to heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/Levin. Your responses are crucial to this survey, and they'll provide Heritage leadership with crucial feedback as they work closely with the folks in Washington to promote your values, secure America's borders, and restore our freedoms. By completing this very important survey today, you're standing up for the values that have made this country great. And my friends at Heritage need you to act now to maximize their impact on President Trump's first 100 days. So please don't wait. Our future depends on you. Together, we can make a difference, and future generations inherit a nation that is free, prosperous, and strong. So please, right now, visit heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/Levin, complete your survey, and join the fight for America's future. That's heritage.org/Levin, paid for by the Great Heritage Foundation.
It's kind of dark in here, but I'm asking for a show of hands. Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago? The one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake? Google it if you've not seen it. So that scene has been on my mind. Everybody's asking me what you've been thinking about these days. Well,
I mean, tell me you haven't missed that. Oh, it is just kind of like purely entertaining when you don't have the fear of, and that could actually be the next president. I mean, that's entertainment right there. If Kamala Harris wants to get into stand-up, she's got a future career. And the best part about her stand-up is just prepare to do like a political speech. Yeah, I mean, it's the best material that she could possibly present. So, yes, you have Kamala Harris. She made her return to I don't know, trial balloon her new strategy of elephants. I mean, the symbolism is interesting anyway, given that you're going to talk about elephants when you're not a big fan of Republicans, as I understand. But anyway, be interesting to see what her next move is and whether she does run for governor of California. If so, California, I mean, look, you're screwed. But then again, I mean, that's been true for quite some time. But for the rest of us, super entertaining. Super entertaining at that point. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin. It is always a pleasure being here with you. You can catch me at Brian Mudd Radio socially. The Brian Mudd Show podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And you can get Life, Liberty, and Levin this weekend. Now, Mark's been in the Holy Land this week. He's going to be back this weekend in time for Saturday and Sunday's Life, Liberty, and Levin's. John Yo and Robert Greenway, his guest on Life, Liberty, Levin, 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Watch it live. Make sure you hit up your DVR as well. Always catch those episodes. And on Sunday, also 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox, you've got Adam Sohn and Newt Gingrich, the guests for that show. All right, so I've been talking about the backstory with Mike Waltz's wild day. Started the day as National Security Advisor. Did not last in that position long today and was nominated to a new post by the end of it. And the story about why this likely had come about. So, yeah, the whole Signal app situation. You had Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic that somehow or another got in a Signal discussion about some of the operation update details for a March 15th attack on the Houthis. All that stuff happened. You had the scumbag Goldberg who sat back for a week and a half, seeing if he'd be included in any other communications when it was clear that he wasn't going to be, and that evidently it was a mistake. He came public and then tried to, play as though he was a patriot. He is now involved with the lawsuit that is filed against the the Trump administration on this. And the lawsuit assigned to the judge, D.C. Judge James Boasberg, who already ruled against Trump in the Alien Enemies Act. And behind the scenes, you've had some updates, including the case being filed and amended to include some additional alleged communications with other officials, including Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and his family. So somewhere along the way, between a Fox and Friends appearance this morning and the time where President Trump said, nope, we've got to get you out, something must have come up that was going to be an issue there. But it wasn't long. It wasn't long that Mike Waltz had to wait to see what was going to happen next. Because it was just after 2 that Trump ended up posting this truth. He said, I am pleased to announce that I will be nominating Mike Waltz to be the next United States ambassador to the United Nations. From his time in uniform on the battlefield, in Congress, and as my national security advisor, Mike Waltz has worked hard to put our nation's interests first. I know that he will do the same in his new role. In the interim, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as national security advisor while continuing his strong leadership at the State Department. Together, we will continue to fight tirelessly to make America and the world safe again. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I always like that. It's kind of like his rally on Tuesday for 100 days. And pay attention to this, 99.9% talking about the end of catch and release in this country. That literally only nine border crossers have been allowed entry into this country under his administration. But anyway, as we take a look at what's happened here today, 2 points. First, it could be said, and maybe spun, that the NSA decision with Waltz wasn't related to the Signal app situation. President Trump, he needs a UN ambassador. I got to get somebody in that post. And Mike Waltz, I have no doubt. Mike Waltz, he'll do a good job. On the other hand, if the timing for this decision were all part of a larger plan, like if this were your A plan, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, probably not going to be named your interim national security advisor. You're probably not going to have Waltz in a cabinet meeting just yesterday. You're probably not going to have him out there doing Fox and Friends this morning, talking about things in his role as national security advisor. So that pretty much gives you an idea that Trump did not already have Waltz's successor in hand, and that something did come up. And it's almost certainly going to be related to some of these legal wranglings that have been going on behind the scenes. And the information has come up as the administration continues to investigate some of this backstory. Now, when you put all this together, it takes me to the next thing. It is no time for the Senate to be weak-kneed. NSA is a whole different ball wax, obviously. It doesn't require Senate approval. So Waltz hasn't been through the Senate confirmation process before. The role of UN ambassador, that requires Senate confirmation. So against the backdrop of the Signal situation, he's going to get a big-time grilling. Things going to get real up in here. And so you are going to see the knives come out for him quickly. Now, Mike can handle it. Again, we're talking about a Green Beret colonel. But the concern would be for those weak-kneed GOPers in the Senate. It is absolutely no time for weak knees. Senate Republicans need to send Waltz to the UN. He is exactly what they need. And what this tells you, with whatever it is that came out today, is that obviously it doesn't point, and I never would have suspected that it would have been anything, that Waltz in particular would have done that had been improper. But all this is just going to be used against him incessantly. And we know the rhinos in the Senate. We know how difficult the process can be. So Waltz is going to have a lot in store. And this is a time where you're going to have a lot of folks that are going to be wobbly, that are inclined to be wobbly. So putting the pieces together, again, it's pretty clear what's happened here. It's also something that's a given. Mike Waltz will be a great UN ambassador. By the way, I mean, you want to talk about just a great book, a great read as well. And you pick up, if you want to know kind of the way that the man thinks, his most recent book, How to Think Like a Green Beret. It is a phenomenal read. You take a look at what's happening here, and this is indicative of the entire plan, right? So the left's plan for Trump was what for 4 years? It was lawfare. I mean, shoot, you go all the way back. It was Trump-Russia collusion. Then you get past Trump-Russia collusion, and you have the Ukrainian phone call. The first go-around with Zelensky, and we're going to impeach him on that. And then you have January 6th, and we're going to try to disqualify him for that. And then you have every lawfare tactic in the book used, from the federal government to the state. We're going to indict him. We're going to book him. We're going to mugshot him. And now we're even going to shoot him, right? Everything they could do to try to stop the man. The legal system, though, has always been their easiest means. Now, I mentioned there are over 220 lawsuits that have already been filed against the Trump administration, more than 2 per day. It's an unprecedented number. And so many of those, you know, you'll hear about the ones that are like nationwide injunctions that will stop the Trump administration from doing something. And you've also had an unprecedented number of Supreme Court occasions where they've stepped in that have ruled on these emergency situations. May 15th is going to be extremely important for what the Supreme Court is going to take up on birthright citizenship, but also on limiting, they damn well better, limiting the authority of lower court judges. So you have these various different lawsuits that are out there, and as they are advancing through the system, it's all aimed at the resistance. It's all aimed at trying to put an end to Trump. And so what he's done with Waltz is another masterclass in the situation. Whatever turned out not to be ideal for him today is something that he is ended up spinning into a positive, not only for Waltz, but for his administration to feel to fill a major void that he has at the same time. So, you know, every time you take a look at Trump, he's always, even when he gets caught in a difficult situation, about a step or two ahead. And that is certainly the case when you start taking a look at what's going on with the economy, when you see what's going on with trade deals, and when you see where this next 100 days is going as well. Because among many other things, Trump, he's fighting for you. And I'll break that down next. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
Listen, folks, if you're like me, you're passionate about protecting our American values. That's why I trust the Heritage Foundation. They're dedicated to promoting policies based on free enterprise, limited government, and traditional American values. The Heritage Foundation does more than just produce policy recommendations. They're mobilizing conservatives across the country. And right now, they need you to take action by completing their national survey on President Trump's agenda. Your responses to this survey will help guide Heritage leaders as they work closely with folks in Washington to promote your values, secure America's borders, and restore our freedoms. Here's what I want you to do. Visit heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/LEVIN to complete your survey. It's very, very important. My friends at Heritage need you to act now to help them maximize the impact on President Trump's first 100 days. Heritage is committed to preserving our Founding Fathers' principles and ensuring that America remains a beacon of freedom and opportunity. opportunity. So I know you won't sit on the sidelines. You'll get involved, please, today, and make your voice heard. Visit heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Please complete your survey today. That's heritage.org/LEVIN, paid for by the Great Heritage Foundation.
Americans who are banding together in the face of the greatest man-made economic crisis in modern presidential history. Americans across the political spectrum who are declaring that the president's reckless tariffs hurt workers and families.
The greatest man-made economic crisis. Be afraid. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Coming up in the second hour, I'm going to break down the economic stuff for you because my brain hurts from the just absurdity that has been spouted off since yesterday's GDP number. Here is a quick headline for you. The economy had a great first quarter. Not a... oh my gosh, the economy shrunk. Not a crap. That don't look too good. Not a that was not very. No, it was actually a great first quarter. No hyperbole either. I'm going to break down exactly why that was the case. But the one thing the left thinks they can do right now is break you. The one thing that they have always miscalculated about Trump is that they think they can use the media to get to you with him. They think that they can convince enough people of their view to separate your thoughts and your views from Trump's vision, from why you voted for him in the first place. And they should have learned the lesson last November. Apparently, they still haven't. But the one thing they do have, the tariff stuff, makes people nervous. The average American is economically illiterate. There is risk associated with Trump's tactics here. And so they can prey on those fears. Just thought of Al Gore when so they can do all that stuff. And then they can try to manipulate you. The only way the economy is going to end up in a bad way is if they scare enough people. But I think if they keep putting Kamala out there doing stuff like that, people will just laugh and go, oh, yeah, we're going to be fine. Trump is fighting for you. Yeah, I walked through what's happened with the Waltz situation here in this first hour. And also the role that behind the scenes, the new form of lawfare, the use of the courts to try to exact outcomes, how Trump is not going to let the left have their way. Want to illustrate a quick point on this. Yes, the left has filed over 220 lawsuits against Trump, over 2 per day. One thing you've noticed about Trump is that he learned every single lesson from his first administration, right? He learned how Washington worked, and he went in looking to run it the way that he knew it needed to be run. He knew that he needed to have people that he could trust that would carry out his agenda. He knew that he needed to put it all out there right away to get his agenda passed as quickly as possible. Everything you've seen to this point. But he also knew that the lawsuits were going to come too. I want to give you an idea. During President Trump's first administration, there were 64 nationwide injunctions filed against him. That was an all-time record, by the way. We had never had so many nationwide injunctions filed against a president prior to Donald Trump. Not even those that have been there for 2 terms. Not even FDR, who stayed there so long he died in office. Although, if Biden were still there. Anyway, 64 nationwide injunctions filed against him the first time. How many were actually upheld upon appeal in any capacity? The answer is only 29. In other words, most of them ended up going away. They were struck down. And that was the first time around. And actually, many more of those would have anyway, but the way he ended up going about it in his first term, commonly he would just amend orders so that they would kind of ride the line where they needed to just get out of the crosshairs of whatever that lawsuit was at any given time. But he learned from all that stuff. Brian Mudd in for the Great One.
This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
How long do you think President Trump can blame Biden for the economy?
Kate, can't even blame him now. I mean, the economy last quarter, 2.4% growth. There was no chaos in the world. Now we have this situation with the stock market going, in trouble, with the tariffs going up and down. No one can make an investment decision. Businesses large and small are very worried. Our agricultural industry is disturbed about possible retaliatory tariffs. American consumers are wondering whether they need to hold all their money in the pocket for a coming recession. Trump has really botched the economy in a massive way.
Oh, crap. The stock market was up again. I just noticed that as I'm taking a look at this. It's almost recovered most of its losses and no chaos in the world under Biden. It is hilarious to listen to these people speak. Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley there. And yes, they're trying everything they can do to scare you. That's the bottom line. Hey there, Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin as he is still in the Holy Land. And there's so many different places to go with the economic stuff. And I'm going to walk you through the absurdity, but also the reality of what's going on in the economy, because there is so much fear. The only thing the left has right now is fear. And there is the potential for a self-fulfilling prophecy if you play into their fear. But first, I want to tie up one point I was talking about, where I ended the first hour. I was talking about the extent of the lawfare tactics that are now being used to try to shut down the Trump administration, but also how pervasive it was the first time around. I mean, you knew this intellectually without knowing things necessarily specifically. In the end, Trump won most of the cases that were brought against him in his administration. Most of the nationwide injunctions that were issued against his administration, he won in the end the first time around. And he has learned all the lessons heading into the second round. And there are two different ways that he's going about this tactically. In the Supreme Court, May 15th is one of the most important dates in this country's history because of three cases that have been wound into one. The birthright citizenship case, along with the extent of judicial authority by federal judges that want to try to undo foreign policy by the executive branch. But there's also the court of public opinion, right? And, you know, polls are often worth what you pay for them. We know this. And a lot of the poll numbers out there don't mean a lot. But there are times that there are really instructive things. I was looking for information, you know, when a lot of this nonsense on the injunctions came about. And, you know, a lot of the questions that are asked by pollsters aren't terribly insightful or instructive, because they don't really ask the questions to get the answers that the average person is thinking. But there was one that I found that was the most direct. And, I mean, you already know that this side of Chris Van Hollen and Chuck Schumer, that pretty much nobody is on board with trying to bring back members of MS-13 to this country. But how about just kind of like conceptually? When you had injunctions filed against the president and his ability to deport criminal illegal immigrants, One poll question that I found was this. Do you agree with the Trump administration's policy to deport violent Venezuelan gang members? Very straightforward, right? It's the way the average person thinks, right? We get all to all the legalistic stuff. And do you agree with the Trump administration's policy to deport violent Venezuelan gang members? You'll sometimes hear about, oh, that's a 60-40 issue, an 80-20 issue. I mean, how many issues do 80% of Americans agree on anymore? But I mean, when you get to 80-20, Terry, that's like, holy crap. You know what percentage of Americans in this Sinclair Media poll said, yeah, I agree with the Trump administration on that one. Deport the violent Venezuelan gang members. 94%. 94%. And again, the 6%, Chuck Schumer, Chris Van Hollen, and a few of their family members, I guess. That's a 94-6 issue right there, a 94-6 issue. So you also have the court of public opinion as so many of these absurdities continue to play out. So Trump is strategically playing all elements of this game. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's fighting for you. He will win that in the end. Now, let's talk about some of the econ news, some of the religious views, the Supreme Court, speaking of legal stuff, and in some Doge news. So the GDP yesterday was negative. Okay, you know that. And again, you'll have the Merkleys of the world that will try to scare you over that. But it also, what's not at all what you were likely led to believe. See, on Wednesday, we actually did have what seems like maybe a double dose of bad economic news. First, you had a weak ADP private sector jobs report, and then most of all, a negative first quarter GDP report. And a report that as soon as it hit, didn't have an opportunity to get into it yet. And when I saw the headline read, I was like, that could be some trouble right there. But, I mean, you just knew as soon as you saw that it came in with a negative number, your godless souls and slanderous news media was going to do everything they possibly could to try to destroy Donald Trump with it, and do everything they possibly could to try to scare you over it. Now, there are a couple things that go into this. The people that know the least about economics, in my experience, are those that report things in the news. You know, it's kind of like the people who don't know teach or can't do teach. The people who don't know stuff report on things. It's a similar kind of idea there. No significant offense meant towards teachers. Offense meant towards the godless souls and slanderous news media. But anyway, when you take a look at what happened, the GDP number yesterday. Okay, so it came in at a negative 0.3%. Now, I mean, barely negative, but negative nevertheless. Now, it is something that will be revised multiple times. So it's even possible that by the time they get done revising this thing, it could turn into a positive number anyway. But obviously, anytime you hear about negative economic growth, not going to give you the warm and fuzzies. But the explanation for what actually happened here, we don't even need to play the blame game. It doesn't need to be, this is Biden's fault. It doesn't need to be a Trump taking credit for things. It just needs to be explained. The GDP calculation is a super wonky thing. It's a really wonky thing. And I'm not going to get into all the wonkiness. Not going to get into all the wonkiness. I know that will bore you. I know a lot of people don't want to hear it. But I'll just give you one thing, and it's this. Imports are subtracted from GDP growth. Okay? Imports are subtracted from GDP growth, meaning that the more imports, so the more companies that buy stuff from other places, bring it into this country, the lower the GDP growth. Okay? It doesn't have anything at all to do with what's actually happening in your community, with what's happening across the country. Doesn't have anything at all to do with the real world economy. Simply has to do with how much stuff companies are importing. By the way GDP is calculated, exports are additive to the GDP. So in the grand scheme of Trump wanting to balance trade, and the grand scheme of him wanting to eliminate trade deficits and having that at the root of the tariff policy right now, that is one more reason. If you did not like the first quarter GDP, if you eliminated the trade deficit, that problem goes away. That would be great for GDP. So there's that. But here is how this comes together and just how pervasive within this number the whole company importing a bunch of stuff thing proved to be. What you had is anticipating future tariffs. A bunch of businesses imported a bunch of stuff. In fact, an unprecedented number of things that were brought into this country in the first quarter. I've never seen a number like this. Certainly not year over year. Companies imported 41% more stuff than they did the year before. 41% more stuff. Okay? So again, if you have a lot of imports, GDP goes down just because of the way it's calculated, not because of anything that actually has to do with the real world economy. Now, I want to take a guess at how much growth was subtracted from the GDP number only because of all that stuff that was imported in the first quarter. Over 5%. Over 5%. That's right. If you didn't have any imports reported, you would have had economic growth of over 5%. Now, look, that's not realistic because we are always importing stuff. But if companies had only imported stuff at the normal rate that they normally do, economic growth actually would have come in at north of 2%, which is a very healthy economy. There are two things you take a look at that actually that matter in all this and tell you what's going on in the real world economy. You and me, and how much money we have to buy stuff, how much we are engaged in the economy. Consumer spending accounts for about 70% of the U.S. economy. Okay, so what did we do? We spent 1.8% more than we did the year before. So consumer spending actually rose by 1.8%. And how about business investment? And this is something you know is entirely a Trump story in the first quarter. Business investment was up by more than double that. It was close to 4%. That's huge. That is huge growth. All that money that you heard, all the billions and in some cases over trillions of dollars over time that are going to be invested into the U.S., it started to show up right away. So you had consumer spending that grew by nearly 2%. You had business investment that was up close to 4%. Those are strong numbers. Those are numbers that are even in the same universe as recession territory. That's a very healthy economy right there. So here's what's going to happen. With companies having stocked up on so much stuff, and this is what plays into the lies. I talked about this on Tuesday, where you have, they're not going to be any stuff on shelves next week. And did you hear the imports from China? They're going to be way down next week in California. We have larger inventories. We have more stuff to put on store shelves right now today than we did a year ago today. That is a fact because, again, companies were stocking up on all of this stuff. So I'll tell you how this will come back around and what it means to you next. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
Don't get suckered into the same old free phone game by Big Wireless that comes with a lot of fine print, like requiring you to sign up for 4 lines plus activation fees, plus. And the end of the day, you've paid for that free phone 3 times over. Pure Talk is my sponsor, my wireless company. They have a much better offer. With a qualifying plan of just $35 a month, you can get a brand new Samsung Galaxy A26 for free. Now, this phone is virtually indestructible. Gorilla Glass captures beautiful wide-angle photos with next-generation camera lenses. All you need to do is switch to Pure Talk. For just $35 a month, you get unlimited talk, text, 15 gigs of data, more than you'll ever need, with mobile hotspot, all on one of America's most dependable 5G networks. Go to puretalk.com/Levin to make the switch. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plan when you switch to Pure Talk. Wireless by Americans for Americans.
Do you think more of your Democratic colleagues should be traveling to El Salvador to advocate on behalf of Rodrigo Garcia?
I think you should. Yeah, that's
I'm sorry, what? Congressman? Who should?
You.
Jeez. Happy National Prayer Day to you as well, Representative Omar. Another high-quality individual representing people in the United States of America. Hey there. And so breaking down, Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin, I'm breaking down the economic situation. That isn't at all A, as it appeared, or B, as has been disseminated to you. Consumer spending, healthy. Business investment, huge. The only thing that led to a negative GDP number was a wonky calculation of GDP, where if you have a lot of imports, it is subtracted from economic growth. Companies stocked up on stuff because they wanted to get ahead of tariffs. And so that took away from economic growth, according to the BEA. Now, here is the next piece of this. What's going to happen if companies stocked up? They bought all that stuff in the first quarter, and you're already hearing, well, they're not going to be ordering as much stuff, and not as much stuff is being shipped right now. It's going to balance back out in the second quarter, right? So all that import stuff that had subtracted from economic growth in the first quarter will balance it out in the second quarter. And so you won't have all that negativity. Now, here's the rub. The only way that this can become a negative economy is if you allow it to be. To this day, you have not paid a tariff for anything. That has not happened. The left has scared you about it. They've tried to make you think that you've paid for it. They have tried to make you think that you're going to go to a store and not find stuff on shelves. And I don't doubt that somewhere, some super lib is going to try to clear out some shelves and call a reporter, empty shelves. That would be the only way for the foreseeable. You're going to see something like that. But the one thing that they could do is that they really do manage to scare you. Because since consumers are most of the economy, if people really do freak out, if they really do panic, then it could create a self-fulfilling issue, a self-fulfilling prophecy on the economy. That is what they are all in on. So the real world economy came in with economic growth based on yesterday's GDP number north of 2%. There are two sides to stories, one side of facts. That happens to be the fact of the matter. So then you take a look at kind of like the next piece of some of the economic news that we have been dealing with this week. And that plays into the budgeting stuff, but certainly Doge and whether Doge is done and what they have been doing to save you money. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Don't get suckered into the same old free phone game by Big Wireless that comes with a lot of fine print, like requiring you to sign up for 4 lines plus activation fees, plus. And the end of the day, you've paid for that free phone 3 times over. Pure Talk is my sponsor, my wireless company. They have a much better offer. With a qualifying plan of just $35 a month, you can get a brand new Samsung Galaxy A26 for free. Now, this phone is virtually indestructible. Gorilla Glass captures beautiful wide-angle photos with next-generation camera lenses. All you need to do is switch to Pure Talk. For just $35 a month, you get unlimited talk, text, 15 gigs of data, more than you'll ever need, with mobile hotspot, all on one of America's most dependable 5G networks. Go to puretalk.com/Levin to make the switch. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plan when you switch to Pure Talk. Wireless by Americans for Americans.
The fact that Democrats and my colleague, Representative Pramila Jayapal, feel the need to even introduce an amendment that says ICE cannot deport U.S. citizens is bat crazy. This should not even be a discussion. It is not even a question. U.S. citizens cannot be deported by ICE. It's the law. It's the Constitution. I will be astounded if Republicans vote no on this.
I mean, these people, they are lost and they do not know what to do. That is Representative Ted Lieu. There are some people that are backcrap crazy, Lou, and it might be the people that are proposing things like that are these stunts that are being played right now. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. It is always an honor and a pleasure being here with you. You can catch me at Brian Mudd Radio socially, the Brian Mudd Show podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And the great one, he is still in Israel. He's going to be back for Life, Liberty, and Levin this weekend. You can catch him Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. His guests, John Yo and Robert Greenway. And Sunday, again, 8 Eastern, Fox News Channel, Adam Sohn and Newt Gingrich. Check it out. Saturday and Sunday, Life, Liberty, and Levin. Of course, the great one will be back next week, right here behind the mic as well. All right, so breaking down the economy and working into the Doge scene and some of what played out yesterday as a lot of people are trying to write Doge off. Now, Elon was interesting. He entertained with his collection of hats yesterday, and it seemed like at first he was saying goodbyes, and he was to the extent that he's not going to be like pretty much living at the White House, which he has been more or less doing since the start of the Trump administration. But he did say he's going to continue doging a day or two a week from far away. He did mention that he would still be keeping his office in the White House, his hilariously small office, and will be coming back to it probably every other week. And he made it clear that Doge is not going away. Now, on the one hand, because, yes, Musk himself set expectation, hey, we could do $2 trillion here when we reach this phase. And, oh, look, it's only $160 billion in savings. Only $160 billion in savings. When was the last time somebody volunteered their time, came into the government, and saved $160 billion? But here's the more instructive thing, because it's all just numbers anymore, right? I mean, hundreds of billions here, trillions. You know what it actually is to you? You know what Doge has already saved you? You know what Elon Musk has already saved you? $993.79. And even the morons on the left, if they have the opportunity to save $1,000 or to keep the indeterminate crap that's been doged in place, they're taking the $1,000, and anybody tells you differently is lying. That's the real brass tacks thing to you. It's basically $1,000 that Elon and company have already saved you. You know, big balls. He came through. And the more important thing is actually where it's going from here. Now, I mentioned the GDP report and how it was really just the way it's calculated that made it look like it was negative. The real world economy that you and I participate in actually came in with a very healthy read. There was one other area where you had a net decrease in the GDP, and that came from government spending, as was noted by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. The decrease in government spending reflected a decrease in federal government spending that was partly offset by an increase in state and local government spending. So, boom, straight away, you saw some doging start to show up in the GDP. And if there's ever a place we're going to have some negativity, that'll be it. Now, some came from less defense spending in the first quarter. Some of it came from the initial doging. And here's the thing. Approximately 121,000 or close to 7% of the federal government's civilian workforce as of now has been doged, which means there will be continued cost savings going forward just on an account of those agencies, which total over 18,000 different initiatives that have been doged at this point. That is residual savings. But then you get into the next big piece of this thing. Not only is Elon saying, look, we're not going away, but yesterday you also had Florida Congressman Andy Bean of the Congressional Doge Caucus say, we're ready to take the reins and continue to push no matter who is leading the Department of Government Efficiency. So, yeah, I mean, look, we always knew that Elon was going to be taking a step back anyway. He had to. He's a temporary government employee. He's only able to work for 130 days max within a year anyway. So this was coming sooner rather than later. But actually, it looks like Doge is just getting started. And the most important piece is what comes into play next, because they're working on the BBB. You down with the BBB or the BBD, as the case may be, as Trump has referenced recently, the big, beautiful deal, as opposed to bill. So if you get the Doge caucus doging and the BBB, what Elon has started, they actually finished. That's the most important place anyway, right? That's where this stuff is funded. And if they don't fund, they could get to $2 trillion. In fact, you heard Lindsey Graham yesterday say that the Senate is now looking at how to save $1.5 to $2 trillion. So don't believe a lot of the nonsense you hear. Elon's not going away. Doge has already saved you $1,000. And with the help of the Doge caucus in Congress, we might just get to $2 trillion before the 4th of July next year. And on that note, takes me to religious liberty. Now, the United States Supreme Court, 6 more cases they heard this week, and one in particular that could prove absolutely critical to the future of school choice, religious liberty, among so many other things. So you have this case, the one that I have been most closely watching in this session so far, the Oklahoma Charter School Board versus Drummond case. So in this case, you have an Oklahoma charter school, first of its kind, Catholic virtual school. And there is this lawsuit. It's been brought against it saying, hey, you can't have public funds going to this Catholic virtual school. And so here we go with yet another case that has been brought up as a separation of church and state case. Something that does not exist in this country, something that never has existed in this country, but something that is extremely important right now in the crosshairs of this ruling. So for some reason yesterday, before this hearing, you had Justice Amy Coney Barrett that decided to recuse herself. She never actually said why, by the way. I mean, like, if you dig through for reasons, you can see that, like, one of her old friends from Notre Dame provided some legal advice in this case, and maybe that had something to do with it. So, that was a little bit disturbing to see. But nevertheless, the rest of the so-called conservative bloc, which at times can be anything but, they were on board. They were on board with this first in the nation Catholic charter school. And importantly, what the implications could be clear across the country. Because, like, I'm in Florida, we have the largest school choice program in the country. Universal school choice. Doesn't matter your situation. You pay taxes. The amount of money that's going to be spent on your kid going to school, you can use it however you want to in the state of Florida. That's the way we roll. It's what we do. We allow that to be used for religious schools. And so this case has implications in every single state. And, of course, the bigger thing about separation in church and state. And you can tell that this one is probably moving in a positive direction, because you already have the left complaining, about this weakening the separation of church and state. A lot of the headlines that are out there. So anyway, that part of it is a good sign. And I'm going to get into breaking down a little bit more about the whole non-existent aspect of separation of church and state. First, I want to work Jim with first hour. We're talking about Mike Waltz, the whole signal situation. Jim from St. Augustine's very patiently been waiting on the line. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. Hello, Brian. Yeah, I gotta say that I think your earlier assessments of the Signalgate story are spot on. I mean, they're sharp insights, and I appreciate that. One of the things, both puzzling and troubling to me, however, is that here's a question to you. Why not one of the parties on the call, Brian, would not have seen, who in entirety was on the call, some kind of list? In other words, if you and I were on a call and we knew it was going to be a multi-party call, we might want to discern from the beginning who's sharing this call with us, right?
And it's a fair thing. And, Jim, what it gets down to, and this is ultimately the reason why stuff did end up hitting the fan, right, is that there was oversight and ultimately there was accountability. And Waltz himself said, look, it's kind of the buck, stops with me because this was my thing. And what it almost certainly got down to is a matter of him trusting his team. If you have somebody that you trust empirically, like my wife, I trust my wife with anything, right? And if she says, hey, we're good to go with whatever it is we're doing, I'm like, okay, we're good to go. I'm not going to question her or the. Now, is it possible that she could make a mistake? Actually, no, my wife probably could not make a mistake. So bad example. But you get the point where if you have people that you trust, you might not think to double check. And I think that's where the failure ultimately came down, is that you did almost certainly have a staffer that made a mistake and there wasn't, proper oversight given the level of communication that was in place. And, hence what's happened up to this point. And there's no telling, from the lawsuit that is, out there, if there might be more unflattering things that could be uncovered. And I appreciate the call, Jim. The one thing, from the insight standpoint, I do pride myself, from an analytical perspective. But I also, it's from a character witness perspective, Mike Waltz is just one of the finest human beings I've ever known. And his team, he's a Florida congressman, not my congressman. I wish. I'm represented by one of the real tools in Congress in the Palm Beach area. But anyway, no, I've known him for a long time, and I've known his team, and they are first class people. Every last one of them I've ever dealt with. Colonel in the Green Beret, he operates his life, that way. It's very much that kind of thing. So, I knew from the jump that it was oversight and that it was a mistake, because he didn't go into the NSA, suddenly surrounding himself with boobs after the kind of people he always kept around him. So, yeah, I think that ultimately that level of oversight is what we're talking about here. Let's go to Tracy. You got Tracy on the economy here. Tracy, welcome to the show.
I'm sorry, my connection might be a little bad here. I'm in the car.
You sound good, actually. Go for it.
Okay, good. Thanks. So my question is relative to the strong growth in economy, and I'm cautiously optimistic. So right now I'm doing all right. But I'm wondering how much of that strong consumer growth is being done on credit, and what does that really say about our economy? Because I think our credit card debt as a country is growing.
Okay, so fair point. And two things about that. If you take a look at the average credit score, for example, right now, and of course that factors in the amount of debt that people are carrying, it is within a point of the highest it's ever been in our country's history. The last time that we were in a recession, now we were in a technical recession in 2022, the first half of 2022. The economists just didn't go along with it, I think because Joe Biden was president. But the last time you had a declared recession was the blip at the beginning of COVID, when you had all the morons who locked people down and people were really kicked out of jobs and everything else. The average credit score in the country heading into that it was about 40% or 40 points less than where it is today. About 40 points less. And so there's a relativism here. When you take a look at the number of people in the workforce, when you take a look at the labor force participation rate, which had been improving, and you take a look at people and their ability to manage the debt that they currently have, they're actually much better positioned than anything that looks like the most recent recession. And by the way, it's consistent. Typically you'll get a credit score in the 670 range on average heading into a recession. So even on those data points, it doesn't point in that particular direction. Now, where the stuff would hit the fan is if you started to see mass layoffs. That is, the thing. And that's where it comes back to consumer spending. People keep spending. You're not going to have that. If people freak out and they believe, the left, then yeah, that's where you could end up getting into some trouble. So good question, but the economic numbers around that right now, even debt, are very healthy relative to where we've been. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
Don't get suckered into the same old free phone game by Big Wireless that comes with a lot of fine print, like requiring you to sign up for 4 lines plus activation fees, plus. And the end of the day, you've paid for that free phone 3 times over. Pure Talk is my sponsor, my wireless company. They have a much better offer. With a qualifying plan of just $35 a month, you can get a brand new Samsung Galaxy A26 for free. Now, this phone is virtually indestructible. Gorilla Glass captures beautiful wide-angle photos with next-generation camera lenses. All you need to do is switch to Pure Talk. For just $35 a month, you get unlimited talk, text, 15 gigs of data, more than you'll ever need, with mobile hotspot, all on one of America's most dependable 5G networks. Go to puretalk.com/Levin to make the switch. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plan when you switch to Pure Talk. Wireless by Americans for Americans.
So as we bow our heads in this beautiful day, once again we have to trust our God, because our God knows exactly where we're going, what we're doing, knows every inch of our life. And may He continue to hear our prayers, to guide our steps and build up our beloved nation to even greater heights. We're in the process of doing some great things. I get criticized no matter what, but I just go forward because everyone knows we're right. All we're doing is what they've done to us for 40 years, but we're doing it bigger and better. That's the only thing we're doing.
To that, Mr. President, I say amen. His National Day of Prayer event is hosted at the White House, the Rose Garden. Beautiful presentation and very nice words. And, the one thing in particular about Trump, and you've heard it, but it remains true and continue to hear regularly, that it's on his mind. He believes that he's here for a purpose. I mean, he always did, but surviving the assassination attempts, he believes that God has him here to do what he is doing on behalf of you. He is very much a changed man that way. And so, there is a lot of sincerity in those words, not just, it's, politician or, Trump saying what he thinks he needs to say on the National Day of Prayer. No, there is absolute authenticity. There we go. To those words by the president. Now, in reference the SCOTUS case and the non-existent separation of church and state, Brian Mudd in for the great one.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
So I went to them and said, look, we got to get rare earth. They have great rare earth, meaning certain minerals, materials. They have things that a lot of places don't have. It's a big asset that they have. And we made a deal today where we get, much more in theory than the $350 billion.
Yeah, so they got some earth. It's kind of rare. Some of it rarer than some of the earth we have around here. The deal is done, right? So we got the Ukrainian deal done. That the pestilent child, Zelensky, when he carried out and went through his little scene, that he ended up not going through with his White House visit with the president. Well, that deal is now done. I'm going to talk about leveraging the art of the deal and what comes next. Get to that in just a bit. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. Mark, he is still in the Holy Land. He will be back this weekend for Life, Liberty, and Levin, of course, all of next week. Now, just before the end of the second hour, I was talking about the Supreme Court, non-existent separation of church and state. I know you know this. Intellectually, you know this. I just want to make sure you're armed for what comes next. So since we have had this Oklahoma charter school case, and you have the whole narrative about separation of church and state out there, again, these headlines from all of your godless souls and slanderous news media, separation, church and state, and Supreme Court, they might weaken it again. I just want to arm you informationally with what's real in this situation. So when you get into, things like, here's another headline from Slate. The Supreme Court seems to think the separation of church and state is anti-Catholic bigotry. Okay. The headlines, the pretext behind them suggest that these people have never read the Constitution, but they pretend to be able to report on it, or they're just really intellectually dishonest liars. And in fact, every person who has ever said that there is a constitutionally mandated separation of church and state is either clueless or they are liars, because it is not and has never been a thing, does not exist within the Constitution. So just kind of take you through this real quick. What's commonly referred to as the first reference to the separation of church and state came well after the country's founding. It was in 1802 when Joe Biden was just a young pup. I think Joe Biden, 1802, I think he was still in school at that point. Don't think he had his law degree yet. But anyway, it was in 1802 when Thomas Jefferson stated that the government should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, that was instructive because it was actually straight out of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. And that, of course, states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Okay, so what you don't have in the Constitution is an edict that, hey, you got to have church way over there when we got the state over here. None of that. That was an invented characterization advanced by secular interest groups based on a false premise. The premise of anything is false, rejected. So context is always key in discussing these things. And, many without context have attempted to manipulate the words that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion to mean that, of course, religion and government, they can't intersect. Could not be farther from the truth. The context for the language comes in part with the understanding of our country's founding. The United States was founded out of what? A successful revolution against the British Crown, a country that happened to have an established state religion, the Church of England. The Establishment Clause obviously states there shall not be an established state religion or an official religion of the United States, a la the Church of England, so that you may have the freedom to practice your faith or not to, as you see fit, as opposed to the government-imposed religion. So it certainly did not exclude religion from holding influence in government. In fact, you don't need to look any further than our country's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, to see just how important faith, God, was to the founders. feel that on this National Day of Prayer, it's worthwhile going through this real quick. You have 4 references to God within the declaration. The first reference is within the first sentence. To assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. The second reference is one that is much more widely known. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator. I wonder who that creator was. It was a tree, right? Like it grew on a tree. Their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The third reference, stated as with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. And the fourth reference is also one that is generally widely known. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So the country was founded on the principle that our rights are God-given as opposed to government-given. It's what historically has actually made the United States different than the rest of the world. It is also what led to our country's loose group of colonies growing into the world's leading superpower within 150 years. Not a mistake. So not only is there no such thing as a separation of church and state, this union was quite literally founded with divine providence, in the words of the founders. So this is also why, among many other functions of government, in God we trust is on our currency. Now, I always invite, Democrats who want to talk about separation of church and state. Okay, just leave your money with me. Yeah, I mean, clearly this is a problem for you. We should not have God on our money. Just leave it right here with me. Go ahead and take it. It's also why, yes, you have an annual National Prayer Breakfast. It's why you have a National Day of Prayer that is recognized by our government. It's why government meetings and functions begin with a prayer. It's why there is no such thing as separation in church and state. Never has been. False premise. What there is a mandated religious neutrality from a point of governance so that you are free to worship or not worship as you see fit. And so it's for those reasons that the United States Supreme Court, in order to uphold the Constitution, will and must rule in favor of the Catholic charter school in Oklahoma. And that case in particular, I mean, it'll be an interesting tell. This is an open and shut case constitutionally. You're going to really see what that court is made of with those justices and how they end up voting. You'll see just the extent to which people can be anti-American. I'll try to be cautiously optimistic, but based upon the way the hearing went, you could hear skepticism from some of the usual suspects on that court. All right, so let's talk about the art of the deal, leveraging the art of the deal, and what we're getting into here. So, Trump, these tariffs, the trade deals, all this stuff coming together. You have the clip where he's talking about the rare earths, Ukraine, that deal getting done. Maybe you read Art of the Deal, maybe you haven't. I think maybe by now Xi Jinping's gotten around to it. We know, for example, that Little Rocket Man, we know that even North Korea's Little Rocket Man at least had the book delivered to him. Remember Dennis Rodman, he delivered a copy of The Art of the Deal, Trump's first term, to Little Rocket Man. Something that continues to confound me is the extent to which world leaders are so dense. It's a few questions for you. One, if you punch Donald Trump, what is Trump going to do? You punch Trump, what's going to happen? Second question, if you retaliate against Donald Trump, what's he going to do? Third question, if you come to the table seeking a deal with him, if you put your hand out to Donald Trump, what is he going to do? Now, you don't need to be a world leader or at this point, even a person who has read The Art of the Deal to know the answers to the questions are, one, he's going to hit you harder. 2, he's going to retaliate harder. And 3, if you put your hand out, the man will negotiate. Now, the lugheads in leadership of countries and various institutions still, in so many respects, have proven they don't get this. And it's remarkable to me that after having had him as president for 4 years already, somehow or another, in the 79th year of his life, they thought Trump was going to start doing things differently, or that, this should be a surprise. So you remember back to the Oval Office meeting with Zelensky when it turned south, and Zelensky became indignant. Trump looked at him and said, look, you don't have the cards, right? You don't have the cards. Now, if Trump were some tin pot dictator from a third world country or something just about as irrelevant, say like the Prime Minister of Canada, for example, things would be different, because in that instance, you would not have the cards. You would not have the cards. But they're not in that position, right? Because the U.S. economy is the top economy in the world. Inherently, no other country has the cards that we have. In fact, did you know the U.S. economy is almost double the size of the entire Eurozone? U.S. economy is almost double the entire Eurozone. B, even if other countries had economies that could compare to ours, they would still come out net losers going toe-to-toe with us on tariffs, because they're the countries that benefit most from trade. There are 195 countries in the world. I referenced this on Tuesday. How many do you think we have trade surpluses with? 195 countries. How many do we have trades? The answer is 5. 5. We have trade surpluses with Australia, Hong Kong, Central, and a couple countries, Central South America, and the Netherlands. That's it. That means that in an eye-for-eye situation, the U.S. would come out the biggest loser only 5 times compared to 190 times for other countries. And so, on that note, it takes you to the point of negotiation. I'll pick up there next. Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
All Americans who care about their due process rights to vote with their feet. Don't go to El Salvador as tourists, so long as the government of El Salvador is violating the constitutional rights of people who reside in America. There are lots of other nice countries in the region, like Costa Rica or Guatemala or others. I've also called upon states to divest pension fund holdings from companies that do business in El Salvador, and I was pleased to see Governor Pritzker of Illinois announce he planned to do that.
So that is the senator representing MS-13 members. That is Mr. Van Hollen from Maryland, everybody, who enjoys time with our favorite member of MS-13 in El Salvador. Now, a couple things about that situation. One, that's a tough putt right there. We're all going to have to just take down our El Salvadorian vacations. But it is spectacular that they're doubling and tripling down on this particular man, this particular narrative. I mentioned earlier that this became a 94% issue. The one poll that I have seen that asked the question specifically of Americans, do you support the Trump administration deporting violent Venezuelan gang members? It comes in 94%. Let's do that. And got to give the man credit for doubling down on his situation. That's going to work out great for you, man. But yeah, that's tough. Going to have to cut back on our El Salvadorian travel plans for now. Okay, so talking about trade, talking about Trump's art of the deal in trade, and actually ended up getting a great question that came in. Trump will also often talk about like trade deficits and that being a bad thing. You'll have some people, including some economists, that go, well, no, it's not a bad thing. Well, without getting too much into the nuts and bolts of it, I mentioned earlier that the GDP, if you have imports they subtract that from the GDP number. If you have exports, things that we are sending outside this country, that adds to the GDP. So without getting any deeper into it's a good or a bad thing, I mean, obviously, the federal government, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, thinks it's a bad enough thing that if we import stuff more than we export, they subtract that from the GDP. They subtract that from the growth rate of our economy. So hopefully that helps kind of at a base level explain why trade deficits are not viewed economically as a positive thing, no matter how much it's spun. And so many companies have set things up on the way that trade has been, with the U.S. being abused by other countries. I mean, the reason that the imbalance is so bad, it's a remarkable thing. We do about $6 trillion in trade a year. We are the second largest manufacturer in the world. And we somehow or another manage a $1 trillion trade deficit every year. Again, $6 trillion round trip we're doing. We end up in the hole by $1 trillion. And the reason comes down to many countries just don't even let us sell things in their country because they have tariffs that are so high that we can't break into their markets in the first place. You know, you'll have people that, oh my gosh, look at the 145% tariff rate on China right now. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Guess what? You know, that's like normal with what a lot of countries do to us in many different product categories because they just want to keep our companies out. Brian Mudd in for the Great One.
It is not second guessing or anything. I think it's fair to go back on and look at this. Look, we had the most qualified person who'd run for president in this country's history at the top of the ticket. That in itself should have got this thing won. We had, in my opinion, and you can disagree with me, I think history will prove me right, a very unqualified person on the other side.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Tim Walz, everybody. It is remarkable. You imagine the collective brain power. It had Kamala and Tim, the old Tim Pond, had they actually gotten in, you imagine the collective brain power surely would have been the lowest that it's ever been in our nation's history. I think even Slow Joe, Dementia Joe, I think even he could pull up the other half here over Tim Walz, the man with the white coat. So you had Kamala with her coming out party last night as she is making herself known to the public again, maybe trial balloting a run for governor or just trying to figure out where she still fits into this world, her and her elephants. And that was Tim Walz on Tuesday. Minnesota should forever be ashamed of itself. That is the real takeaway from the Tim Walz experience, that you have chosen that man as your governor. That is quite the indictment of your state. Now, as we take a look at, by the way, couple-day programming note here. So, Life, Liberty, Levin. Mark, he is in Israel, has been all this week, but he is back this weekend for Life, Liberty, and Levin. So, Saturday, 8 o'clock, join him, Fox News Channel, 8 Eastern, always. Go ahead and set the DVR. You've got John Yo and Robert Greenway that'll be his guest. And then Sundays, Life, Liberty, Levin, again, 8 Eastern, Fox News Channel. Adam Sohn and Newt Gingrich will be the guests. And check it out. And then, of course, Mark will be back all next week. Now, walking you through the trade situation, Trump's art of the deal, and just some of the remarkable things that we continue to see with some of these world leaders that are arguably about as unimpressive as Tim Walz, for example, happens to be. Talk about how it is that some of these people to this day, if you're going to be dealing with Donald Trump on trade, on anything, but on trade in particular, would you not have read The Art of the Deal? Again, it's been out there since 87. You would think somewhere along the way, these people are going, you know what, man, it seems like he actually might do the things that he has said. Let's see what this book is about. So, one of the many great anecdotes in The Art of the Deal, and one of maybe my favorite, The exchange that Trump talks about with Jimmy Carter. Good old Captain Peanut. That was my nickname for Jimmy back in Georgia. I'm from Georgia. My nickname for him was always Captain Peanut. You know, sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you govern like one. That was Jimmy Carter. May he rest in peace. As Trump noted, after being voted out of office in 1980, this is in The Art of the Deal. Carter, he visited with Trump to ask for a donation. He wanted Trump to donate for his presidential library. And Trump asked him how much he was looking for. And Carter asked for $5 million, which, by the way, is about $18 million in today's money. And I mean, look, in 1980, Trump super successful at this point already, but far from being, you know, the billionaire that he eventually became. $18 million, I mean, regardless of one's circumstances, that's brazen, but I mean, even more so then. So Trump wrote this. He said, I was dumbfounded. I didn't even answer him. But he said that he learned something from that exchange. And it was this. He said, until then, I never understood how Jimmy Carter became president. The answer is that as poorly qualified as he was for the job, Jimmy Carter had the nerve, the guts, the balls to ask for something extraordinary. And that's part of this as well, because Trump will ask for things that are extraordinary to get to where he wants to get to. But so is perhaps the most important aspect of negotiation, according to Trump. The best thing that you can do is to deal from strength, and leverage is the best strength that you can have. Now, I mentioned that we have, in terms of a scorecard, with trade around the world, 195 countries to deal with, and we have trade surpluses with 5. We are the world's largest economy, meaning everybody that has something to sell wants to be selling into the United States. So, where is all of the leverage? Now, Trump has literally been talking about the United States being taken advantage of on trade deals, of course, for over 40 years. As you know, in his first administration, he started the implementation of the tariffs against China. He brokered the USMCA trade deal. Second time around, he was ready to broker a good deal. There is nothing here that is a surprise. He even explicitly spelled this out for the rest of the world on February 13th. You know, one of the more remarkable things, my biggest surprise about Liberation Day was that anybody was surprised about it. On February 13th, Trump announced the fair and reciprocal plan. And he said this in it. He said the fair and reciprocal plan will seek to correct long-standing imbalances in international trade and ensure fairness across the board. America will no longer tolerate unfair trade practices. The United States is one of the most open economies in the world, yet our trading partners keep their markets closed to our exports. This lack of reciprocity is unfair and contributes to our large and persistent annual trade deficit. Again, that was part of a whole plan that was put on the White House website on February 13th. When this was announced, when this was published, did any countries come to the table, stick out their hand to broker a better deal? Nope. What did they think was going to happen? That this would be the time that Trump wasn't going to do what he said he was going to do? So, yeah, I mean, the one thing that surprised me about Liberation Day, where a lot of people are like, I'm not so sure I feel liberated. I'm feeling a little uptight right now, especially when I look at the stock market. Feeling a little bound, actually, not necessarily so liberated. What I was so surprised by was that people were so surprised. I mean, that it was the extent to which other people, I'm like, really? Really, people? So, there are two things about all this. Whatever would be felt here is felt far worse everywhere else. At least 190 countries elsewhere anyway. Because we're far better positioned for any of this than any of them. China, they are so incredibly levered to us. People think that like China is the end all be all with us. You know that we do significantly more trade with Mexico, significantly more trade with Canada than we even do with China. I mean, China's a big deal. Don't get me wrong. Big deal, especially, for all the cheap Chinese crap that you buy in some store. It is a big deal. Certainly a big deal that so many of our technology companies had sold out over time to, the slave labor in China. And so, yeah, a lot of our technology is tied to China. But even then, with all of that, Mexico and Canada are still big trade partners. So you start taking a look at all this, and it's like, what were people thinking? So you take a look at the end game here. Zelensky was a punk in the Oval, but what's happened over the past day? Well, he agreed to the trade deal with Trump that he originally blew up. Right? Ended up going along with that trade deal after all. And was he better off for waiting to get to this place? The one thing that is so incredibly dumb about Zelensky in all of this, if the U.S. is involved in Ukraine, like we have a mineral interest in Ukraine, you think Russia is more or less likely to blow American interest up? You think that might make you more or less safe in your war against Russia? I mean, dumb as brick Zelensky, the single safest thing you could do, because this guy just wants American boots on the ground, which ain't ever going to happen, obviously. Lives in a delusional fantasy land that somehow or another, he can just keep this thing going the way it is in perpetuity. But yeah, actually having Americans with a vested interest inside your country is the single safest thing you could possibly do. The single biggest thing to de-escalate tension. And what did he do? Finally came around on a deal. But not before how many more people died in the meantime? So yeah, he agreed to the deal that he originally blew up. How that whole tough guy charade worked out for him. Xi Jinping, he has been, nothing but indignant. And where did that lead him? So this was interesting. After Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the U.S. was putting China to the side. Okay, so earlier today, Scott Bessent said we are putting China to the side to hammer out deals with 17 of our top 18 trading partners, all but China. The word was that not 2 hours later, China reached out and said they wanted to engage. The fact of the matter is that to this day, you're not paid for anything more due to tariffs. Fact of the matter is that the GSS media has tried to scare you into thinking that we're in a recession. This trade war is going to bury you and your family. It's going to bury the United States. In reality, the news media is all the foreign countries have had in their corner. Zelensky was playing the press. When he came here and he played the role of punk and tough guy, he's been so used to all the media interests around the world just fawning over him and getting whatever he wanted. He was still playing the game. He still thought that he could play the sympathy game. Oh, Trump's bullying me. Didn't work. Stunt didn't work. The EU, Canada, Mexico, they were at this too. You know who's smarter in all these countries? The one leader that might actually get it? Take a look at Modi over in India. India, that's the deal that's coming together first. That's the deal that's coming together first. And here's why that's so incredibly important as it pertains to China. India is not only one of our top 10 trading partners, India is actually our fastest growing trade partner, and India is stealing an exponential amount of business from China because of the tariff situation. You have American companies moving over production from China to India as fast as they possibly can, including Apple having moved all production of iPhones out of China and into India. And here's the thing about that piece of the deal. So the whole thing with India is that, hey, we're going to eliminate deficits here, right? So what the deal is centering around right now that the finishing touches are being put on is that we will adjust the tariffs on both ends. Adjust the tariffs that we charge India. India will lower the tariffs dramatically on us to the point to where there's no longer a trade imbalance. And you can see how the roadmap is being laid out for the rest of the world. So this deal, once it comes to fruition, is going to eliminate the trade imbalance with India by collecting a little bit more in tariffs from India than we had collected before, it looks like, and India dropping the tariffs they charged against U.S. goods by more than half. Trade imbalance gone. Now, what is that going to do to send a message to the rest of the world? And what do you think that is going to do in China, who is getting hit from both ends in real time right now? So, yeah, maybe finally Xi Jinping sometime early this morning read the art of the deal, or maybe he had it translated to him. And maybe he realized that the GSS media no longer controls you and can't just scare you into thinking we're into a recession and making Trump go away and get rid of the bad tariffs and things. All of these lessons, at a minimum, should have been learned last November. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mudd Levin.
In President Trump's agenda is grounded in one thing: common sense. While the Democrat Party went off the deep end and doubled down on pure craziness, President Trump pledged to restore common sense back to the United States of America. In a little more than 3 months, that's exactly what he's done.
Yeah, sure enough. I mean, hey, it is a remarkable thing as we're here just past 100 days. We're, Tuesday, we not only rallied with Trump, but we also broke down all of the accomplishments, the historic accomplishments. And there are just so many things to keep in focus here as we take a look at where we are in this process. So, I was talking about trade. These deals are starting to come together in a very big way. You're going to start to see some of the impact of that. Again, the economy, it is not in recession. It is not receding at all. It was only about imports by companies. The consumer economy was healthy. The business investment into this country was remarkable. And now you're starting to see the trade piece. The thing is, every other country was going to feel this more than us. That's the leverage that Trump had to play to get the deals. And so that's starting to Ukraine got that deal done. Oh, by the way, the terms of that deal, the Ukraine deal. So any foreign aid that we provide to Ukraine going forward, they're going to repay us in minerals. That's the way this thing is going to work. So no more free ride for Ukraine. Dollar for dollar, minerals back to us for anything we help them with. And by the way, tariff free, no tariffs on the United States. So that is a huge, huge step forward. Think about that is a very impressive deal over the hundreds of billions of dollars we're just giving away and getting nothing in return previously. Mentioned the situation that's coming together with India to where the deal is being set up so they will reduce the tariffs they charge us by more than half of what they've done to eliminate the trade deficit based upon the way that we usually go about trade. It's putting the pressure on China, and other countries are starting to get the message.